practicing for interviewing is just like walking into a gym and your personal trainer has not seen you for 2 years and they ask you to bench press 250 pounds. Probably impossible, right? Your muscle starts to atrophy at that point. And so you must practice. It is a non-negotiable before you go into an interview. That's recording on your phone in front of a spouse or a partner or a boyfriend or girlfriend or just a friend in general. There are also a lot of AI tools that exist that allow you to get asked a question by an AI tool. You give an answer and it gives you a score on how you answer that question. And those are great too.
Hi, I'm Claudia Giraldo, and this season I'm here with
Ana Lucia Lenis.
This is Good Life with Good AI, the podcast where we show you how to make AI do the heavy lifting so you can get your time back
and enjoy what truly matters.
Hi, Ana Lu. Hi, AJ. How are you?
Hey.
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
We are very happy.
We're super happy to have you. We've been speaking with Ana Lu for a while that it would be so nice to have someone here to illustrate us a little bit more on how we navigate this crazy job market. So I'm super, super happy to have you. And for those of you who don't know AJ Maises has a degree in communication management and organizational design from Ithaca College, a certification on employment law at UC Berkeley. He has 15 years of experience recruiting and in HR, basically, including 6 years at Meta. He's the founder and CEO of The Human Reach, which has been featured in Fox, CBS, and NBC. So I cannot think of someone with more authority to speak about these things than you. And we would love to start speaking about what drove you to human resources from such an early time. Do you feel the same enthusiasm with technology applied to HR and recruiting?
Such a great question. And it's so nice to be with you, first of all. So thanks for having me. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My father was a serial CEO of multiple fast casual restaurant companies. My grandfather started and sold several businesses as well. And my mom actually was an HR consultant before she had me and my sister. And so it's so funny, right? When you look back and you think, we make our own choices in life, some of those things are hardwired. I like to think that that's true for myself. And so I credit my mom and my dad for kind of where I am today. HR and the people space in general is a huge passion of mine because it genuinely adds value and helps people. I think there's this weird connotation out in the world that, HR people are paper pushers or they're out to get people and get folks in trouble. And that has not been my experience working in HR. And yes, I worked at Meta for 6 years as a global HR leader there. But prior to that, I'd worked in several other companies as an HR leader. And that was never my experience. HR was not there to, get people in trouble or, push paper around. It really was to partner with people so that they're doing their best work. So whether that's a leader for the first time and they're exploring kind of what that means to them, or it's, an employee who's going through a really tricky situation personally and thinking about how the business can support that person so that they can be their best self. That has been my experience. And so that has kept me in this line of work.
Well, that's a very enthusiastic idea of HR and totally focus on the core of what it is human resources, is working with people.
Yes.
And talking about people, AJ, thinking of someone who has been in the same job for many years, or including people that are just finishing university, starting to find the first job of their dreams. How is looking for a job now with all the AI and technology compared with maybe 5 years ago?
It has changed dramatically. And I think the first thing that you notice when you're out there looking for a role and you get bombarded with all these different AI tools that you could use. I mean, there's the mega ones, if you will, like, Claude and ChatGPT and Perplexity and things like that. And then you have like the hyper niche ones who their sole purpose, maybe with a, ChatGPT wrapper, is to help with AI interview prep or AI resume fixing or AI auto applying. And there's just a lot of noise in the space right now. Each of them have their different rates of efficacy, I would say. And so far, at least at the time of us chatting now, it's not quite there yet in terms of like agentic, right? When you think of AI, you have the agentic things, so things that are happening outside of you directing what to happen. And then you have, you still have to be there in the driver's seat, having to make the clicks or ask the questions to the agent. And I think we're more so on the former, not so much on the agentic thing. I think it's going to change over the next 12 to 18 months, but there's certainly a lot of noise in the ecosystem and it makes it confusing. It makes it hard to navigate.
I think it feels really overwhelming, right? And for those people who have been in stable jobs for a while, suddenly finding themselves out of a job and looking into a market that moves entirely different is daunting. So I've heard of many of my friends saying, oh, it's okay. I've used AI and I've tailored my resume and I've applied for a job, right? You're surrounded by clients and you hear what goes on in the market. How much does that really help?
That's a tough question because there's a lot of nuance there, but let me drill down and say this. AI right now is really great at giving suggestions and providing alternative ways of saying things or looking at something. It's also great at doing like small tasks. But when I talk to clients, it's super important to understand first that LLMs have the same vernacular and the same like nomenclature that they use. So you'll notice like when you write to an AI tool, it'll start to sound the same, right? The way that it phrases sentences, the specific words that it chooses, the punctuation that it uses. And so, yes, it's a huge time saver, but where a lot of folks go wrong is that they copy and paste what AI is spitting out, the AI tool, and they're pasting it into their resume. And what that does is it makes you sound exactly the same to every other candidate who's using AI as part of their like resume writing process or cover letter writing process or application answering process. And so I think what we have to be careful of, and what I would encourage everyone watching to do, is not use AI in a copy and paste format, but to use it to give you other ideas in terms of, for example, how to quantify something on your resume. So you may have heard that quantifying on your resume is one of the best ways to give the reader an understanding of the scope of the work that you've done. And a lot of times when I'm meeting with clients, our clients will say like, oh, I don't know how to quantify that. And 9.99 times out of 10, there is a way to quantify it. It's just that you haven't necessarily thought of it yet. And so what I tell clients to do is use AI to help you quantify it, to give you ideas on like things that you quantify. Is it time? Is it money? Is it size? Is it scope? Is it people? And it's going to give you some really thoughtful answers as to how to do that. That's kind of the resume creation piece. And then we go to things like AI auto apply. So you may have heard of, various different services that use AI to auto apply to roles as they're posted. And again, as of the recording of this date, we've tested a lot of these different tools. And the best success rate that we found with these tools is a 0.05% success rate of getting an interview after an AI auto apply
Wow, that's
software.
nothing.
It's nothing, exactly. And so is it something? Yes. But when you think about and look back at the hires that were made last year, depending on the study that you read, 70 to 85% of those hires were made because they were referred into the opportunity, right? A human put their rubber stamp on somebody, and that person then made it to the top of the pile to get a call. And so I want to caution everybody that, sure, you can use AI auto apply services, but the efficacy of that is not going to replace real human activity.
Right. That reminds me of a relative of mine who applied recently for a position. He saw it online, and so he called the manager. He knew the manager of that company, and he said, I'm super interested in this job. And they were like, oops, sorry, already taken. And it had come out like 2 days before.
That's such a bummer. Sometimes by the time a company posts a role, they're already in conversations, and they're typically in conversations with people that they know, that's in their circle or in their like second degree circle. And so that's an all too common occurrence, is that, the role's posted, people apply, and then they get, oh, sorry, we already have somebody who's late stage interviews or has already had an offer.
And sometimes maybe you need to create the need of your position because maybe in some conversations, a company or a team, don't think they need you, but at some point you can create your own position. It's a little bit more difficult, but I suppose that in some cases it works.
Yes, you're exactly right. We hear this all the time from clients that they will have conversations with folks that they know, or they'll have conversations with folks that they are just meeting for the first time. They'll be talking about each other's work as part of a networking strategy. And then through the course of talking, that person is in what we call an executive referral authority role, right? So they can refer you and they have some clout. So the referral carries weight and they'll say, oh my God, I just had this amazing conversation with Anna Lou and she's amazing. And I actually think, we've been talking about XYZ role for X months. And I think we should definitely talk to her because she is incredible. That happens all the time with clients of ours that are getting roles created for them.
That's very impressive, no, Claudia? Because sometimes it's not there, but you can create it. Very inspiring. And you gave us some tips, AJ, but maybe which are the most common mistakes that you see people make when they are starting with the job search? And it doesn't matter if it's senior profiles or other more junior people. You have many other things that you have seen.
Yes, I'll give the top 3, which I think are going to be helpful. The first one is not starting with the end in mind. And so what I mean by that is the market today is hiring square pegs for square holes. It's not hiring for people or individuals who can do a broad array of things. It doesn't mean that you can't do a broad array of things, but you have to be hyper specific externally when people are looking at you in terms of what you do and the value that you bring and the type of work that is specifically exciting to you. Because again, if we're a Jack or Jill of all trades, then we're a master of none. And that's exactly what the market thinks. So starting with the end in mind, what is it that you do that you love to do where your feet tingles when you wake up in the morning because you get to go do that thing? That is your specialty. And so that's number 1. Number 2 is then when you have your specialty, then it's making sure that your assets are curated to that specific specialty. And what I mean by that is that you're using keywords, you're using quantification, you are looking at job descriptions and mirroring what the job descriptions are saying in your materials, your resume, your LinkedIn, your cover letter, your application questions, etc. And the third thing is solely relying on job boards. I'm talking about like LinkedIn auto apply, I'm talking about Indeed, I'm talking about other places where you just might be submitting your application online. I mentioned the study earlier, right? 70 to 85% of roles are hired because someone knew somebody, they were referred into the company, which means that 15 to 20%, 30% of roles are hired through job boards. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that you have to spend your time where you have the biggest probability of landing an interview and therefore an offer. And so what I tell clients is that 80% of your time should be spent networking, following up after networking, providing value to the people that you're meeting with. And then 20% of your time during the week should be spent on job boards and applying online.
As I was listening to you, I was thinking of what you mentioned just a few minutes ago on how it is important to just not copy paste. I remember doing that exercise with AI with a specific position and then saying, tailor my letter with these job descriptions. And when I got it, it was like, it made no sense. I had to adjust at least half of it because it just mimics, but it doesn't really reflect who you are or, where your strengths are.
Yes.
So those are very good tips.
And the last mistake you mentioned, I think that normally people do totally the opposite. They spend 80% of the time sending job applications and 20, 15, sometimes 0% of the time doing networking, talking with people, having coffees. So that's very, very important.
Yep, very important.
And AJ, I was wondering, when we think about the job market, we always think about the candidate when you're out of a job and then you're looking for something new. But how is the current market? How does it look like for a recruiter? How does it look from the other side of the spectrum?
I've talked with a lot of my recruiter friends, and I used to be a recruiter back before I got into like the HR side of the fence. And recently, what a lot of my recruiter friends are saying is that they're getting inundated with resumes and people who are not qualified for the role simply because of the AI auto apply softwares. And so they are inundated with, 2x, 3x, 4x the amount of candidates that they have to go through. And so the conversations that I've had have really transpired to, them emoting around, A, how difficult that is, and B, if they have a requisition open and they have, let's just say, 800 candidates that have applied to that role, instead of going through all 800 candidates, they are always going to start with a referral because it has the highest likelihood of resembling someone who currently works at that company and then therefore more highly resembling somebody who is then going to get an offer. And so you have to think about recruiters are typically gold with a number of hires that they have to make a quarter, a half, a year. And also as part of that goal, it's what's called time to fill. And so the faster that a recruiter fills a requisition, they're given higher, ratings and promotions and things like that. Also by filling the number of roles. So if you think about how recruiters are incentivized, they're going to go to the source that has the highest likelihood of passing all the interviews the fastest. And the way to do that is by talking to those who are referred to those roles first. Because we all have these, like me people in our networks, right? Like hangs out with like. And so if you've hired a really smart person, let's just say in an engineering role, and that person refers a friend, the odds are that they're of the same caliber or in the same arena that that person who originally got hired is. And so it behooves recruiters to go into that pile first.
Does that mean, AJ, that it's equally important to do the networking with the people who you might know in other companies in similar roles than with recruiters? Because then if you have recruiters in your database, then it makes sense to reach out to them directly, right?
Yes, I love that. And it's more of an and than a but. So recruiters are great to have relationships with. I always think that that's an important part of a job search strategy. But yes, and you need to have conversations with people who are in akin roles to yours so that you have a network of folks that could potentially refer you either into their company or to other people that they're connected to that are also in akin roles. So you have to play that game of second and third degree connections.
One question. I have a friend who told me one day, I had an interview with a robot. I was like, really? how this works? So I'm not saying that you're going to be replaced by the robot, but thinking about this, do you think it's true? And second, which role does AI play on that and the new role of the recruiters?
So glad you brought this up. I know this to be true because our clients are reporting that they are having first round screening conversations with an AI tool versus a human.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, this is interesting, right? The genesis behind AI is it's going to save us time, right? It's going to do the monotonous, boring things that we either don't like to do or don't have time to do, whatever. And so the AI interviewing tools that companies are adopting, that was also the genesis. We don't have as many recruiters as we once did maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We don't have the time then, therefore, to spend, qualifying all these people before we pass them to hiring managers to interview. And so these AI interview tools were invented in order to solve that problem. And I think we're in a really interesting place with where that will evolve into. And that interesting place is, I believe that we need to find a balance between time-saving tasks and creating a human experience for folks.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get there eventually, right? We're kind of like on the leading edge of AI right now. And so everything's like, how can we automate this? How can we make this agentic, blah, blah, blah. But if you think that we're just going to completely eradicate it, I don't think that's ever going to be in our future. I think it's always going to be there. And so the biggest advice that I give to clients when they're talking to an AI interviewing tool, A, know if you can redo your answer before you go into the tool. So is it something that you can practice and rehearse before you go in? The second is, if you don't know, then just treat it like a regular interview. So have your stories prepared, especially stories of where you've made an impact. A hack that I tell people, and this is true for AI interviews or real human interviews, go to the job description, go to the qualifications or the requirements for the role. So let's just say one of the bullets is work cross-functionally across various different teams in order to deliver marketing plans, whatever. Then what you're going to do is you're going to add the words, tell me about a time when you had to work cross-functionally across teams, blah, blah, blah. And then you put the bullet. And that's how you know what types of stories or examples you need to have at the ready in order to answer the most commonly asked behavioral type questions when you're interviewing.
That's pretty good. And going a little bit deeper, which other things do you think people should be thinking of? Which kind of abilities should they be strengthening, particularly now in the age of AI with, so many people looking for the same position?
I think ingenuity is like a really vague term, but I think times at which you've had to create something 0 to 1 is extremely important. And not only is it important for the larger companies, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, it's also way more important for the startup world. And so I read a very interesting statistic this week, or maybe it was late last week. There's been a lot of layoffs in the news right now, especially in tech, right? The big giants, FANG companies. And what's funny is that over the last quarter or two, there has been equal or more hiring of that talent that got laid off than there ever has before. So we see in the headlines like, oh my gosh, another 10,000 person layoff. Oh my gosh, 8,000 people, 30,000 people. All of those jobs have been recreated. Where have they been recreated? They've been recreated in small to medium-sized businesses. So you have a lot of VC money that's getting pumped into the system right now because A, it's a good thing to do, but B, the result of that is that there's a lot of hiring that's happening at small to medium-sized companies. And so if you can talk about, especially in those types of opportunities, the times where you built something 0 to 1, that's great. Another thing is that if you have built anything that is agentic in terms of AI, so a tool, an AI process or something that can do the work of something that's monotonous or, again, boring, anytime that you've been able to then train others to do said task, I think are 3 really good points of injection while you're interviewing or on your materials, like your resume, LinkedIn, or cover letter.
And as you said, AJ, there's a lot of tools available for people looking for jobs. But what would you recommend people focusing on? Because there's so much in the market outside. What is your advice?
Where do they start?
So I'm going to plant my flag in the ground and say, use things like Claude, ChatGPT for ideas on how to tailor your resume, your LinkedIn, your cover letter. Do not copy and paste, but use those tools to help give you ideas. And then in terms of playing into the 80 to 85% of roles that are hired via referral, LinkedIn is going to be your best source. So how are you making sure that your LinkedIn is not only up to date, but tells the right story to some of the things that we talked about earlier? And then how are you making sure that you're not just relying on the folks that you are personally connected with, so your first degree connections? How are you making sure that you are growing your connections so that you have the most opportunity available to you to, again, be referred into other opportunities and be connected to people that are in your line of work, right? So I'm an HR person. I would want to be connected to other HR VPs, HR directors, VPs of people, chief people officers. And so the same goes for you, right? If you're an account executive that you work in sales, right, you want to be connected to lots of different account executives at other companies because that's going to increase the chances, again, of you being apt to be referred.
AJ, you mentioned earlier using AI to prepare for interviews. Do you have any best practices or tips for people to do that?
Yes. So the first thing that I'm going to say about practicing for interviewing is just like walking into a gym and your personal trainer has not seen you for 2 years and they ask you to bench press 250 pounds. Probably impossible, right? Your muscle starts to atrophy at that point. And so you must practice. It is a non-negotiable before you go into an interview. So I don't care if that's recording on your phone, your answers to some of the behavioral based questions that you could get. I don't care if it's practicing in front of a spouse or a partner or a boyfriend or girlfriend or just a friend in general. There are also a lot of AI tools that exist that allow you to get asked a question by an AI tool, you respond back, you give an answer, and it gives you a score on how you answer that question. And those are great too. So, and I'm not, sponsored by any of those tools, so I won't give any specific, but it is, net so important that you practice your answers and that you know how to properly storytell. I don't care if you're a junior person that's just entering into maybe your second job, or if you're a senior executive, where I'd argue it's even more important to be a good storyteller, but you need to be a good storyteller that's not too verbose. You're using quantification, you're talking about the leadership role that you played, and of course the outcome and being able to quantify the outcome of the thing that you're talking about.
Super interesting.
Yes.
That's great because it does remove the surprise effect and calms the nerves and everything before you go into an interview. And also, when you do interviews that are not with a robot, you have to count on the other people's reaction. And you never know
Yeah.
how they're going to be. So the more you rehearse, the better.
And I know we all don't want to sound like a robot when we're, even if we're talking to a robot, we don't want to sound like a robot. And so, part of the practice is just remembering the work that you did, remembering the thing that happened, remembering the big challenge that occurred, right? And so sometimes if we don't talk about it, we don't necessarily remember all the details. And so it's the first time that we're asked about it, we're like, oh, hold on a second. Let me remember what happened. And then we start being verbose and we go all over the place and we're not getting to the point. So yeah, practicing serves a ton of purposes.
Well, I think that we have now a very impressive list of tips and recommendations, but now we need to go to the more personal side, and it's about you. And we are very curious with Claudia. Obviously, you use AI for your activities and everything, but how do you use AI for your personal life? Do you have any tips that you would like to share with our audience?
Yes. I mean, I use it daily. I use it for like the small stuff, for like finding a good recipe to cook. I'm a baker, so I love baking and like finding good recipes, and all the way to like agentic stuff. And so I've played around with OpenClaw. I'm not sure if you're familiar with OpenClaw, but it's, basically like you can run your own instance of an LLM on your own server. I built that up. I don't use OpenClaw anymore. I use Claude Code, and I've set up basically a bot, if you will, that I can talk to on Slack, that I can talk to on Telegram, and I can ask it to do things for me. So I can ask it to like reach out to somebody and book a meeting. I can have it call somebody to make an appointment or a dinner reservation. I can have it respond to my emails. I can have it compile a report and send it to a bunch of people. So I know that's maybe more on the professional side, but it has been like a huge lifesaver to me, a huge time saver, I would say, in either finding recipes or doing something agentic.
My goodness, but I didn't expect you to be so versed in technology. So can you give up?
Totally.
No, I even wore my nerd glasses today.
For those people who are just starting to experiment with these tools, how do you get to, set up basically your virtual assistant the way you're describing it, right? Do you leverage AI tools to tell you how to do it?
Yes, for sure. I'd say like the first step is go watch YouTube videos on how to set up your own virtual private server. That was where I started, and I even learned what a BPS even was. I didn't even know that existed. But it's important, as I've learned, to set this up in its own private server so that it doesn't have access to your like personal computer and your personal information and things like that. It just kind of lives in its own space that you can access from your computer, but has its own like confines. So that's number one, YouTube. And then number two is, absolutely. Like once you have it installed and you have Claude Code installed, getting the Pro Max subscription is the best. I think it's like $200 a month or something. And it allows you to use it pretty much freely without having to incur a lot of additional cost. And then, you can talk to it just like you would a colleague or a friend and say like, hey, I'm trying to build this, and this. Can you help me set it up? And, you kind of just keep building. And then there are all these other like repositories of what are called skills that you can install into your Claude instance to like teach it how to do something. So like teach it how to access your email, your calendar, your Google Docs, Slack, Telegram. And so I just spent like a few weeks just slowly adding new skills to Claude and thinking of an idea. Oh, that'd be really cool if we could automate that, or it'd be really cool if Claude could help me with this. I actually named my Claude bot Diego. and so I talked to it. Yeah. So I talked to it like he's Diego and give him his own email address. He has his own credentials and can do a whole bunch of things for me. And every night before he quote unquote goes to bed, he like takes all of his learnings and he logs that into a file so that he's able to be intelligent the next day when I wake up as well. So yeah, it's super fun. I find it really fascinating.
I'm very curious about something that you said, and is when you spoke about the things that you can prepare to speak about, you mentioned as well if you had done anything with AI, or any agentic developments. How much do you think people are being asked to have those skills now? Because everybody feels a little bit like, the fear of missing out, right? It's like, this seems to be coming and everybody's going to ask me about that. How true is that really?
I think it's happening more than ever, and it's only going to increase. I think people are getting asked about it a lot. I was just talking with somebody who works in HR, and they're looking for what's next. They're currently employed, but they're doing a bunch of AI work as part of their job at the company to see like, hey, how can we automate some of these employee self-help things? Like, how can we create a bot that can answer questions about benefits or answer questions about, maternity leave or something? And as she was going into these interviews, they were asking her like, how have you infused AI into your work as an HR person? And she was able to draw upon that because, she led that project for that company. So I do think people are going to be asked about it more and more. So if you're working at a company right now, and even if you're not, even if you're unemployed and you're looking for what's next, dive into AI, build something. It doesn't mean that it has to have like shipped if you're unemployed to an actual user base, but how have you created something via your idea? How have you explored which tool is the best? What's the intended outcome of the tool? How is it helping? Intended outcome meaning like, is it reducing the amount of time that you have to spend? Is it reducing the amount of money that you have to spend? Is it, what's the outcome?
Interesting.
Very interesting. Talking about future, this is moving really, really fast. How do you see the job market evolving in the next few years? How is going to be AI used? And this is something that really scares you, or you are very positive? What is your impression about what is going to happen finding the job of your dreams?
I think AI is going to continue to enhance the way that we live. And so part of the way that we live is working. I think that we are on the precipice of some pretty monumental shifts in the way that we look at work, commerce, and how we spend our time. There's a lot of AI philosophers or, gurus who will say that with the advent of robotics, you compare that with AI, but then you compare that with super intelligence and autonomous thinking, and it's going to really create additional opportunities for how humans create and add value to each other and the world. And different AI, LLM CEOs have gone, back and forth on the pendulum between like, oh, AI is going to replace everybody's job to, oh, AI is going to enhance everybody's job. And right now we've kind of like swung back. Like Sam Altman is basically kind of come back and saying that like, oh, AI is not going to replace everybody's jobs. It's going to
It's not
enhance.
that
Whereas
bad.
before, whereas before he was saying that like,
Yeah.
doomed, we're doomed. And so, I'm very curious to see what actually transpires and the motivations behind some of these narratives that are out there around AI. My personal take is that I don't think that there's ever going to not be a need for humans to add value to each other and for there to be some sort of trade of services or commerce or things like that. What we are seeing right now is that blue collar jobs, so plumbers, electricians, carpenters, auto mechanics, they are now starting to get paid like software engineers were back in 2018, 2017. And so I tell people the world is a constantly evolving place, and if you don't want to work in a desk job or you want to explore what that's like, go into the trades, go into a blue collar role, because that is probably further out to be roboticized than like people that are sitting at a computer all day.
AJ, I heard a comment recently that certain companies are already starting to merge the roles of technology and HR, which for me sounds like innovation at its core. So, do you think that's something that might happen increasingly in the future, or is just people experimenting with that?
Yes, but with a caveat. And the caveat is that I really see and know HR to be kind of like 2 or 3 different buckets. There's the things like benefits and 401k and, PTO, maternity leave, paternity leave, things like that. I think all of those things absolutely can be replaced by AI. Like, the person that typically was, and gosh, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this. Please don't cancel me. But the more like routine administrative part of HR, I think that's absolutely going to be agentified at some point. The part where it comes to running an investigation, so let's say there's a like, sexual harassment claim or a discrimination claim or something of that sort, or there's a new leader who's just become a new leader for the first time and they need help partnering with an HR business partner to zhuzh up their skills on what it means to be a leader. All of that stuff is going to necessitate a human to do. And the funny thing about working in HR, I tell this to people all the time, is that HR on the second piece that I was talking about is kind of recession proof or AI proof because people do great things and stupid things all the time. And
That's so
AI.
true. My dad worked in HR
Yeah.
for 20 years, and he used to say that common sense is the less common of the senses.
Yes, totally. That's totally true. Like this is a long, long time ago before HR, but I once had a person who she was an EA and she took a company's private jet on her own time to fly her and her friends to Vegas and back. And right, like no AI tool or robot is going to be able to deal with that.
Oh
And
my
like,
God.
and so, so I always tell people like it's going to necessitate human interaction to do those types of things versus like the more administrative.
And also the culture of the company, the soul. Because finally, companies are people. AI will be like a layer, but finally, I like to feel when I work in a place that you are part of something that you are connected with some values. And I think that you need humans. So, yeah, it's gonna
I
be
agree
it's
with you.
gonna be interesting how this evolve.
Yes, it is going to be interesting. And I think, no one has a crystal ball. So I try not to hypothesize too much about the exact specifics about what it's going to look like because it just, like you're saying, Analu, like it's going to change and it changes every week. And
Yeah.
so what I try to do is I try to be a little bit more higher altitude and looking at patterns and themes. What's kind of like seesawing? What types of things are we hearing a ton about? And then just kind of like creating a POV about how I think things are going, knowing that things are going to continue to change. So to not like settle for what we have now, but to think about and continue to be curious about what also exists. Because I think that's the only way to not live in anxiety about what happens in AI. It's about just being curious then and adding to your knowledge and information about what's being invented, what was sunsetted, what is on the horizon, what are people talking about, and that way I just have information to cure that curiosity.
Excellent tips. AJ, and we usually like closing our episodes with our guest, giving our audience some recommendations. You've already given them a lot of information, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm very relieved to hear that the same way that all these massive layoffs are happening, there are other people who are starting to hire, because sometimes it does feel like it's a company market, not an employee market, right? So AI or not AI, which additional recommendations would you like to give them in terms of it could be other things to listen to, it could be books, it could be just tips on best practices. What do you think could help them during these times of so many transitions?
There's so much to say. I'll give like my top two. The number one tip that I'll give you, dear listener, is to make sure that you're drowning out the noise. And so, Claudia, you talked about, all the news of all these layoffs and things like that. The doom and gloom and just like being around negative toxicity or consuming that type of headline is very bad for our mental health. And so, regardless if you're employed and you're looking for what's next, or you're unemployed and you're looking for what's next, if you're consuming content that's going to drain you, AKA the news, you're going to see that in how you're showing up, how you're waking up, like the state of anxiety or not that you're in. So even for me, obviously I run my company, but I don't like to be around that stuff. And so like I deleted the news app off of my phone. I don't want to read it. I don't want to see it. If something happens to come into my purview, then of course I'll read it in that case. Like, I have friends that send me articles or whatever, but I'm very choosy about which ones I click on because I want to make sure that I'm consuming the right information. And to your point, to what we were talking about earlier, sometimes the points are like biased and they're skewed. I don't care where you fall in the
Yeah.
political spectrum. Like the news is designed to be entertainment. They are entertainment companies. And so wherever you watch, there's a feeling that's trying to get extracted by any sort of headline or the way that the story is being produced. So anyway, protect yourself, I would say. And then number two is knowing the definition between depression and anxiety. And I know that sounds weird, but here's how I look at it, right? Because with all the stuff that's happening, the job search, the news, world conflict, right? I know we feel like a lot of things. And
Yeah,
so,
overwhelming.
yeah. And so the definition of anxiety, like the simplest way to put it is kind of what we talked about earlier, is it's living in a future that has not been created yet. The definition of depression is living in the past and something that's happened to us where we don't have anything that we can do about it. And so I really try this is a constant daily thing for me. I really try to live myself in the present. I live in the present day. And when I notice my brain going into the thought of what if, that's typically anxiety. Or what about, that's depression. And so I really try to live in the moment of what I can do. What's one small step that I can make to move forward in order for me to reach my goal? Because then I'm living in the present versus living in what coulda, shoulda, woulda transpired.
And you're in control, right?
Yeah, you are in control.
It's amazing that you remind us that this is not only about technology, robots, CVs, craziness. It's about people, because maybe you have a lot of experience, your CV is perfect. But if the day of the interview with the robot or the recruiter, you reflect something different because you have a depression, you have anxiety, maybe it's not going to work. You need to be careful with your mental health too. So that's very, very impressive and something that we tend to forget very easily. So thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, it's more common than you think.
Yeah.
Funny anecdote, being on both sides of the spectrum. I remember once interviewing and a candidate came in and she started crying and, something happened to her just before coming to the interview. And I just felt bad. And I was like, that's okay. We'll redo it some other time. And as well as a candidate, I remember once I went to an interview and the guy was like, oh, you know what? I had this huge party yesterday and I feel really jet lagged and hangover. So I'm going to turn off my camera while I go for coffee. Obviously, that didn't go well. So, yeah, they're humans at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. That human experience, I think, is so important to recognize, right? On both sides, the interviewer, the person interviewing.
Don't go for coffee and don't say that you have a jet lag because of a big party before the interview.
Yeah, probably
oh my
not.
goodness,
Probably
that was really
not.
dreadful.
Gosh.
First time ever. AJ, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your knowledge. I'm really excited because I think this is one of those episodes that is truly going to help a lot of people. And thank you for taking the time of meeting with us, for having this wonderful, joyful disposition that you usually have. And most of all, for giving us a little bit of direction in all this chaos. People sometimes, they run into circumstances and they say, oh my goodness, what do I do? Where do I start? What do I look into? And I think what you've told us is very, very enlightening.
It's my pleasure. Thanks again for having me. It was lovely to spend time with you both.
Well, we had a lot of fun. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that many people took a lot of notes because this is very, very useful. So thank you again for your time.
Y yo necesito practicar mi español más.
¡Wow! ¡Muy bien! That was a good
Próximo
surprise.
episodio, español.
Qué bueno.
Wonderful. Well, and to all of you, thank you for being with us for another episode of Good Life with Good AI. We hope you enjoyed it as we did, and that you found it useful. Do let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, the other things that you would like us to speak about. Please don't forget to follow us in YouTube or Spotify so you get alerts on new episodes. And let's continue this journey of exploring the new ways in which people are using AI and how it can make our life better. And if you're one of those really good cases of use of AI and you think you have a space in this podcast, please get in touch with us. We would love to get in touch with you. See you next episode. Bye.
Bye.